The road stretched like a faded ribbon, unraveling beneath the sky brushed in watercolor, orange near the horizon, lilac melting above. The heat of the day had retreated, leaving behind a soft, amber hush. Even the crickets waited. The sun, low and lazy, spilled gold across the fields like it had forgotten how to set. A small car wandered down the two-lane highway, its wheels murmuring gently against the cracks and gravel. There was no other traffic, no sound but the steady hum of tires and the occasional sigh of wind through long grass. In that light, warm, quiet, endlessly patient, the world seemed suspended, like a painting left half-finished, waiting for someone to return. Inside the car, time moved more slowly. Mara held the steering wheel with one hand, her other resting quietly in her lap. She didn't speak. She didn't need to. Eyes traced the road, steady but tired, like she'd been thinking for too long. In the passenger seat, her father, Joseph, sat with his window down, letting the air pass across his weathered face. He didn't look at the road, only at the horizon, as if something out there might call his name. In the back, Leo leaned against the window, one hand propped beneath his chin. The sky reflected in his glasses. He didn't remember his uncle, only stories and the way his mother's voice softened when she told them. No one spoke, but in that silence, something old and delicate was being shared. Not words, but feeling, like a folded letter passed from hand to hand, unopened but understood. They slowed when they saw the old station. It rose like a ghost on the edge of the highway, rusted tin roof sagging in the middle, signs warned to pale echoes of color. A broken vending machine stood at its side, half swallowed by weeds. The wind played with a scrap of fabric caught in the eaves. It fluttered softly, like a flag waving farewell. Mara pulled over without speaking. Maybe they needed a break. Maybe the stillness called to her. Or maybe it was something else. Something not quite reason, not quite feeling, but somewhere in between. She stepped out first. The air was warm and smelled of dry leaves and far-off rain. Leo followed her, slow and curious. Joseph remained in his seat, staring ahead. Then he saw him just beyond the station. The shoulder of the road. A man sat on a crumbling stone wall. His back was to them, his shoulders slightly slouched, his head turned just enough to watch the sun dip lower, lower. Didn't move, not even as the wind pulled gently at his coat. He looked like someone who had been sitting there for hours, or maybe years. Mara noticed him second, her eyes narrowing faintly, not in fear, more in thought. There was something about him, not his shape, or even his stillness, but the way the light wrapped around him like it had known him before. Leo said nothing. He only watched. No one approached. But none of them looked away. Joseph's breath caught. It wasn't loud. It wasn't sharp. Just a slight intake of air, like someone tasting something familiar on the wind. His fingers twitched in his lap. His eyes narrowed, not in suspicion, but in wonder. Something flickered in him. It's like a match struck in a long, dark room. A memory not fully formed, already awake. The man still didn't turn, but Joseph was no longer looking at a stranger. He was looking at a shape he'd carried in dreams, caked in unanswered questions. All those years, all those silences. He blinked, once stunned, and then the moment passed, like dry grass bending beneath the breeze. Never fully touched, never fully gone. No one spoke of it, but inside the car, and along the road, and beneath the golden sky, something had shifted, quietly, permanently, and somewhere deeper still, something long lost had just begun to stir. The curtains, pale with time, still fluttered faintly at the open window, though no breeze seemed to pass. A thin layer of dust softened every surface. The shelves, the windowsill, the spine of a book left half-freed. The air smelled like old pages and pine wood, and something gentler, like fabric that once held warmth. Aaron's bed was still made, the quilt pulled tight, the pillow untouched. On the desk, a photo frame faced the wall, turned away years ago, but never removed. No one came here much anymore. And yet, the room felt alert in its stillness, as though it was listening, quietly waiting for footsteps that hadn't come home in 2 decades. Downstairs, above the fireplace, family photographs watched over the house. Smiling moments, frozen in time, a birthday candle mid-blow, a fishing line cast into a river. Mara in her graduation gown beside Joseph in his Sunday shirt, and in every frame, there was space. A gap, a breath left open between bodies, and Aaron had been carefully removed from nothing. He had simply never been added again. No one had replaced him. No one had spoken aloud about whether they should. His name was not forbidden, key, but it was heavy, and they carried it gently. Even Leo noticed it, though he never said so. Sometimes, when he looked at the photos, he tilted his head like something invisible stood just outside the frame, someone watching with a kind face and quiet eyes. There was a time, long ago, when Joseph would walk to the mailbox every evening just before the porch light came on. He would lift the lid, peer inside, and pause a beat too long for habit. Then, one day, he stopped. He still fetched the post, but without the pause, without the hope. In a drawer by his bedside, beneath yellowing clippings and a set of old medals, were the letters. They were never sent, not because Joseph couldn't write them, but because he could. And that was the part that hurt the most. They began the same way, almost always, wherever you are. I hope it's peaceful. The kitchen had once been a place of noise, wooden chairs scraping across tiles, cereal bowls clinking, Mara laughing at something Aaron said with his mouth full. Now, there was only the sound of spoons against porcelain. Mara stirred her tea quietly every morning, watching the steam rise like memory from a warm place. She didn't speak of Aaron unless asked, not because she had forgotten, but because she remembered too clearly the look on her father's face the day the call came, the way the house held its breath for weeks after Leo sat across from her most mornings. He asked small questions, and she answered kindly, but some questions never formed, the kind you only ask when you're sure you want the truth. Instead, they shared quiet breakfasts and crossword puzzles, letting the words they didn't say settle between them like salt on a windowsill. Leo had never met his uncle, and yet, in dreams, they walked together. They never spoke much, but Aaron smiled. He walked barefoot through tall grass, hands in his pockets, head tilted like he was listening to a far-off song. Sometimes he looked older than the story said. Sometimes younger. Always peaceful. Once Leo had awoken with a name on his lips, Aaron, and didn't know why it felt like both a question and a prayer. He never told his mother, but he drew a picture the next day. A man standing in a field beneath a wide-open sky dot in the corner. He wrote, "I think he's still walking." They hadn't planned a road trip. Not really. One morning, Mara just said, "We should go." And Joseph nodded like he'd been waiting. No destination, just the hum of wheels. In the slow unraveling of miles, they passed fields and faded barns, rivers that glimmered like ribbons tossed from heaven. The air smelled of sun-warmed dust and roadside pine. Sometimes Leo asked questions. Sometimes they all just listened to the wind. Inside the car, there was no arguing, no raised voices. Just a kind of silence that feels full, not of tension, but of memory. Each of them carrying Aaron in different ways. Joseph in the weight of his posture, Mara in the slope of her quiet sighs, and Leo in the wondering. They didn't speak about why they'd come, but maybe they didn't need to. Some journeys begin not with directions, but with longing, and sometimes the road answers before anyone asks. The highway faded gently beneath the wheels, folding into evening like the corner of a well-worn book. Out here, the sky had more room to breathe, violet and gold draped across the horizon, like silken scarves tossed by tired hands. The sun, now low and reluctant, brushed the tops of trees with one last kiss of light. The car slowed, not by choice, but by rhythm, as if it too felt the pull of something just ahead. Wind whispered through the cracked windows. The engine hushed itself, and for a breathless moment, everything felt still enough to listen. He was sitting just past the old station, right at the edge where the gravel met the grass, back turned, shoulders gently curved inward. A man, not young, not old, just weathered. He wore a coat that didn't quite fit, with sleeves a little too long and edges frayed like memory itself. His hands rested on his knees, still and easy. And though his face wasn't visible, there was something in the slope of his spine, something too familiar to be overlooked. Mara eased the car to a stop. Joseph didn't speak. He only stared, eyes narrowed softly, as though the man was a word he almost remembered how to read. Leo whispered, "Is he all right?" No one answered. The quiet thickened. Joseph leaned forward, his breath shifting slightly, not startled, but stirred. He hadn't seen that shape in 20 years. And yet, in the lines of that silhouette, there was something. A trace, a pull beneath the ribs, a knowing dot. It wasn't the face. Tilt of the head, the looseness in the hands, like he was listening to something no one else could hear. The moment shimmered, uncertain, fragile, like a bridge made of fog. Mara opened the door first. Her steps were hesitant, not from fear, or from the ache of not knowing which memory she might be stepping into. The gravel crunched softly beneath her shoes. She stopped a few feet away. "Sir?" she asked gently. The man turned, not quickly, not slowly. Snuff. His face, when it came into view, was quiet, weather-worn, lines like rivers carved along his brow and around his mouth. His eyes, the color of dusk. "I'm sorry to bother you," she said, her voice catching faintly. "We just saw you," and he looked at her for a long moment. Then, almost absently, he said, "Aaron." Wasn't a greeting. It wasn't a question. It was an answer, and it fell between them like rain on a drought-struck field. Joseph's breath left his chest in a quiet, broken sound. Mara froze. "Ken." Leo leaned forward in the back seat, wide-eyed, and still Aaron a name they had once said every day, a name they hadn't said in years. Aaron looked past them, toward the sky. "I've been walking a long time," he murmured. "I don't remember where I started. It's just that I had to keep going." His voice was soft, not weak, but distant, like it had spent too many years in silence and wasn't quite sure how to sound anymore. Mara stepped closer. Joseph emerged, slowly from the car, each footstep deliberate. His eyes locked on the man who bore his son's name. Aaron looked at Joseph and paused. There was no sudden recognition, no dramatic reunion, only the long, slow press of familiarity. Something tugging at the edges of memory. "I don't remember everything," Aaron said, voice low, "but I remember a porch swing, a red bike, the way the house smelled after rain." Joseph swallowed. "Do you remember the sycamore tree?" For the first time, Aaron smiled. A small smile, not wide, not sure, but real. He closed his eyes. "Yes," he whispered. "I remember. There was a tire swing, the little girl who never tied her shoes." Mara let out a sound, half laugh, half tear. Her hand flew to her mouth. "That was me," she breathed. Aaron opened his eyes again, and something shifted in them, just slightly. The fog parted, not completely, but enough. "The tree," he said, softly, "was taller than the house. I used to sit under it when I didn't want to be found." Joseph nodded. His eyes were wet, but he didn't wipe them. "That tree's still there," he said. "Been waiting, same as us." Aaron turned toward Mara more fully now. His voice, when it came, was quieter than ever. Is Mother still alive?" Mara's lips trembled. She opened them, closed them, then, slowly, she stepped forward and knelt in front of him. She waited. She said, the words soft as wind, "For a very long time." Aaron didn't move. She would sit on the porch, Mara continued, tears slipping down her cheeks, every evening in the same chair, till the day she stopped. Aaron lowered his gaze. His hands trembled slightly. Mara reached forward, took one gently. She held on longer than anyone, she said, but she didn't leave angry, just tired. A long silence settled over them. The sun dipped lower still, casting shadows that stretched and touched everything gently. Aaron nodded once. "Thank you," he whispered, "for telling me." They didn't hug. No one sobbed. They just sat together in the golden hush, grief and love resting side by side like old friends watching the last light of day. And somewhere above them, a bird circled once, then flew on as if carrying something home. He returned, quietly, without ceremony. The car crested the familiar hill, and the town revealed itself, small rooftops tucked among trees that leaned like watchful guardians, branches touching as if whispering secrets. The air smelled of soil after rain. Home didn't greet him with applause, but it didn't turn away either. Aaron stepped out slowly. His feet met the pavement like they were testing old ground. Everything was smaller than he remembered, and yet it was him who had changed shape. The town had simply waited. As he walked beneath those leaning trees, the leaves stirred overhead, brushing gently in the wind, as if they, too, remembered his name. No announcement was made, but word spread in the way small towns pass it across laundry lines, through the creak of porch swings, between glances over morning coffee. Faces turned behind curtains. Some stared too long. Others looked once and looked away. Was it really him? "It's a miracle," said one neighbor. "A trick of grief," whispered another. But in the end, they all did what quiet towns do best. They let him be. And sometimes, at dusk, an old woman would stand on her porch and nod as he passed, like a story she'd forgotten had just finished its last chapter, over soft conversations by lamplight. The story came gently. He had been injured. A blast, a fall, a long stretch of darkness. His mind had become a shoreline, constantly redrawn. He wandered for years. Sometimes he remembered things, the color of a porch, the smell of bread, a name that wouldn't settle. But mostly he walked, under different names, in towns that never asked questions. He planted gardens, repaired fences, watched skies, until, one night, on a quiet roadside, he dreamed of a little girl with untied shoelaces, swinging beneath a wide tree. She looked up and said, "Come home." When he woke, he began to walk again. This time, with direction. The old tree was still there, taller now, branches fuller, arms still wide. Aaron stood beneath it with his hand on the trunk, eyes closed. The wind moved gently through the leaves, and for a moment, the past wrapped around him like a quilt. Laughter on summer air, the squeak of a swing, the sound of Mara's tiny feet pounding barefoot through the grass. That dream hadn't been just a dream. It had been the part of him that never left. Mara stood at a distance, watching him with a look only a sister could wear, part wonder, part ache, part relief, so deep it didn't know how to rise. She didn't speak. She didn't need to. Joseph opened the door slowly. Aaron's room still smelled of cedar and thyme, and something older. Dust swirled in the light like faint music. The bed remained made. The books remained unread, and the drawer still held a small wooden whistle Aaron had carved when he was 10. "Joseph, didn't say much. He just walked to the window and opened it wide. Air rushed in, like breath returning to lungs. Aaron sat down on the bed, running a hand along the quilt. "I thought this would feel different," he said quietly. Joseph lowered himself into the chair across from him and nodded. "Everything's different, and nothing is." They sat that way for a long time, two shadows in one room, remembering. Leo had always been a quiet child, the kind who listened more than he spoke, who observed the world like it was a moving painting. He didn't ask questions when Aaron returned, but he watched him closely, curiously, like someone reading a book they weren't sure it was fiction or fact. One afternoon, Aaron sat beside him at the kitchen table and took out a square of paper. "Your mother used to love these," he said, with careful fingers. He folded, crease by crease, he shaped memory. Leo leaned closer. "It's a bird." "A crane," Aaron smiled. "If you make 1,000, they say you get a wish." Leo held the finished crane gently in his palms. "Do they fly?" Aaron paused. "In their own way, I think they do." That night, something in the house changed. There was no music, no chatter, only the soft clinking of dishes being put away, the brushing of teeth, the sigh of a chair pushed back from the table. But beneath it all, something hummed, a stillness no longer empty. Mara lit a candle in the living room, just as her mother once did. The flame wavered for a moment, then stood tall. Joseph sat in his chair and dozed, a blanket across his knees. Leo brought his crane to the windowsill and watched it glow against the twilight. Aaron stepped out to the porch, hands in his pockets. The wind met him gently. Somewhere in the trees, an owl called once, then fell silent. He didn't need to say it aloud, but he thought it. "I am home." And though the past could not be changed, the present, this quiet, breathing moment, was enough. The mornings came slow now, not heavy, just unhurried. The kind that start with the rustle of leaves and the soft creak of a gate that had forgotten it could open. Aaron walked the town like he was retracing something, not his past, but the outlines of it. He carried a pair of pruning shears in his coat pocket, a small trowel in the canvas satchel slung across his shoulder. And wherever something leaned or sagged, a bent fence post, a vine-choked trellis, a mailbox half swallowed by ivy, he paused. Not to fix, but to tend. He didn't knock on doors. He just worked quietly. Sometimes the owners would find a flower bed trimmed, a bird bath cleaned, a wooden step repaired. There was no note, no signature, only the feeling that something or someone remembered them. People began to leave out tea or folded cloths or seed packets wrapped in string. And though he never saw conversation, Aaron began to hear his name again, not shouted, not questioned, but offered. Like a welcome that didn't need to be asked for. Mara and Joseph, too, began to speak differently. There was still space between their words, still pauses, still breath held for just a beat too long, but it was a new kind of silence. Not from distance, but from care. It's a kind of quiet where nothing is forced and everything matters. They sat together more often now in the kitchen, on the porch, at the foot of the sycamore. Sometimes they would reminisce, but more often they simply spoke of small things, the price of fruit at the market, how early the birds had returned, the way Leo had begun to hum to himself when he read. One afternoon, Mara turned to Joseph as he dried the dishes and said softly, "I missed your stories." He looked surprised, then smiled, slow and shy. "They were always yours too." The clinking of ceramic resumed, but their hearts beat closer. Leo had been quiet about it, but in his room, tucked between sketch pads and folded paper cranes, a notebook lay open. He wrote in it every evening, soft pencil strokes forming stories. Not quite fictional, not quite remembered. He wrote of men who disappeared into wind and trees, who returned not by maps, but by dreams. He wrote of families made whole, not by time, but by love's quiet persistence. Sometimes he looked out the window and watched Aaron trimming the rose bush at the gate, and he smiled. Asterisk. On the inside cover of the notebook, in small, careful letters, he had written, "Some things vanish, some things wait. Some things are only carried home by wind." It was midwinter, still not cold, but far from spring, when the sycamore bloomed. No one expected it. No weather forecast spoke of unseasonal warmth. And yet one morning, the air smelled faintly of honey and rain. And there they were, pale blossoms opening like secrets from another time. Aaron stood beneath it with one hand resting on its wide trunk. His eyes were closed, head tilted back as petals drifted down around him like slow snow. It wasn't a miracle, not exactly, just a quiet agreement between roots and wind that something beautiful was ready to return. Mara watched from the steps, hands tucked in her sleeves, and for the first time in years, she felt the soft ache of tears that didn't hurt. That evening, Mara lit lanterns and carried the dishes outside. They ate on the old table beneath the tree. Joseph, Aaron, Leo, and her like they once had, as if no time had passed at all. And yet, with the tenderness of people who understood exactly how much had. The plates were simple. Bread, still warm, figs, sliced thin, roasted vegetables, wrapped in linen. There was laughter, not loud, not constant, but steady, like the hum of a favorite song returning on the wind. Crickets sang from the hedgerow. A pair of fireflies blinked along the fence. Somewhere beyond the garden wall, a neighbor played a violin just soft enough to feel like a memory. No one mentioned the years they had lost, but every bite, every glance, every flicker of light between them spoke of years still waiting to be made. When night came fully, the lanterns stayed lit. The stars blinked into place above them, one by one, quiet and certain. Leo laid back in the grass, hands behind his head. Aaron sat beside the tree, a paper crane resting in his palm. Mara brought out a pot of tea. Joseph nodded off in his chair. No one moved to go inside. The wind circled the house, not cold, not in a hurry, like it had nowhere else to be. It moved through the leaves, touched their hair, kissed the surface of their mugs, and in that moment, no one felt the need to explain the past. The present was enough, whole, unspoken, held in light and hush and breath. The wind stayed a while longer, then settled in for the night. Some absences don't echo, they hum, softly like lullabies remembered in quiet rooms. What a way old wooden floorboards hold the shape of footsteps long after someone's gone. That's what Aaron had become in this house. Not a shadow, but a presence, humming gently in the background of every ordinary thing, in the clink of a spoon against a teacup, in the wind that passed through the open window, without asking, in the way Joseph sat a little straighter now, in the way Mara laughed again, softly but true. The silence no longer weighed, it carried. That afternoon, the clouds drifted low and slow, milk white against the sky, the color of faded denim. The garden was still. The air smelled like the start of something kind. Aaron stood near the sycamore, its branches dappled in sun, petals soft beneath his shoes, and from somewhere high, perhaps from a bird, perhaps from nowhere, a feather drifted down, slow as breath, pale as snow, spinning gently as though uncertain where to land. He caught it without thinking, fingers folding around it like it was always meant for him. He looked up, then down, and smiled. Inside, Leo sat by the window. The crane he had folded earlier nestled beside his notebook. He wrote slowly, pencil gliding in curved lines in soft thought. The words came without force, like water finding its way to sea. Not all who disappear are lost. Some are simply finding their way back, one dusty mile at a time. He stared at the page a moment longer, then closed the notebook with care, holding it the way one might hold a fragile truth. And somewhere, not far, just past the edge of the yard, beyond the line of golden trees, the road continued. Not in a hurry, not afraid, just curving softly out of sight. The wind stirred the leaves once more, then moved on, not leaving, just traveling, the kind of wind that carries things home, always in its own time.